off by calculating slope, right? Slope is the steepness of a line. We had two ways to calculate slope. One way was if you had a picture. One way is if you just had 2 points. If you had a picture, we used rise over run. Okay, remember that? You'd count it, rise, count, and run, draw it out, it looked beautiful. If you had 2 points, you used that fancy formula. That formula was y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So that was our second way to calculate slope. We had 2 different methods. After that, we got into like parallel and perpendicular lines. Parallel lines meant slope were the same. Perpendicular meant they crossed the main x, right, in 90 degrees. That took about a day. Then we got into creating equations. So equations that represented lines. And we came up with 3 methods. And it kind of connected like all of our info from before into one little package. The first type of line we learned is the easiest. It's y equals mx plus b. We called that slope y-intercept form. The reason we called it that was m is your slope and b is your y-intercept. If you had a graph and you could tell your y-intercept, super easy to create this equation. The next type of equation we learned was something called general form. Now remember with general form, which is this guy right here. You can only convert into general form, right? Move things around to be general form. You could never just create an equation in general form. It never worked that way. That's the tricky part. Then yesterday we learned our other way to create equations, which was slope-point form, where y1 and x1 were the coordinates of a point, and m was your slope. Today we're going to create equations, and we're just going to try to utilize all of these, as well as the other info leading up to it, so like slope and all that jazz. Awesome. Example 1. It says, given point P at 3, -1, and Q at -2, -6, determine the equation. Remember when we read that, determine the equation means create. So create an equation in general form. In general form can't happen as the first step, right? We always convert to general form. So we have to convert to. Determine the equation in general form of a line passing through the 2 points. Sometimes that freaks people out. That just means you have to use one of these points in your equation. For any question where you're creating an equation, you have 2 options. The first option is Y-intercept form. If you know your Y-intercept, that's definitely the way to go. Looking at these 2 points, are either of these my Y-intercept? No, remember y-intercepts have x value of 0. If I don't have slope-intercept form, that means I have to create slope-point form. I have to. I have no choice. The equation for slope-point form is this. Y minus y1 equals m x minus x1. Where you want to fill in what m equals, what x1 equals, and what y1 equals. Fantastic. Let's start with trying to figure out what m is. So if we want to create slope-point form, we got to figure out what m is. You have 2 ways to figure out your slope. If you have a picture, you use rise over run. We don't have a picture. If you have 2 points given to you, you use that formula I drew up there earlier, where it says m equals y2 minus y1 divided by x2 minus x1. It's been a while since we've used that formula. That's how we calculate slope when given 2 points. The trick is to go to your 2 points, name one of them point 1, name one of them point 2. Doesn't matter which one's which. I'm just going to say this is point 1, so I call this x1, y1. Call this x2, y2. And then just be very careful putting my numbers in. So y2 was -6 minus y1, which is -1, so I have minus -1, divided by x2, which is -2, minus x1, which is 3. You'll notice I put brackets around my -1 to remind myself it's minus a -1. When we calculate this, we calculate the top separately, bottom separately. On the top, -6 minus -1, if you put in your calculator, equals -5. On the bottom, -2 minus 3 equals -5. -5 divided by -5 means my slope is 1. It's +1 because negative and negative cancel out. Slope equals 1. The next thing I need to figure out for my slope point form is my x1 and my y1. Those are one of your random points. It doesn't matter which one you pick. Both would be the right answer. I've already called this x1, y1, point P. So I'm going to say x1 is 3, y1 is -1. I now can create my slope point form by substituting these 3 things. I would have y minus -1 equals m, which is just 1, times x minus 3. This is an equation with the slope that's in between these 2 points, and it would go through both of them. Alright, why wouldn't that be the right answer yet? There was something specifically it wanted.
There's like a negative subtraction.
Yeah, I would definitely alter that to be y plus 1. Over here, you really don't need to write the one in front. I still am, just for what I want to do next. But I would definitely change that minus and that negative to a +1. Agreed. What else do we have to keep doing to fix this question?
Put the x into the, or the m into the x and everything.
Why would we do that? You're right.
To get rid of it so you can take the +1 next to the y and the w.
Yeah, so what Noah's describing is the conversion into general form. Right? So remember, they asked for your equation to be general form, meaning equal to 0, everything on one side. So your final step is to take the equation you just built and start changing it into general form. The first step is to multiply the 1 in. When you multiply the 1 in, nothing changes in this case. Let's have y plus 1 equals x minus 3. After that, I need to start moving things to the other side, right? Because I want to be equal to 0 if it's general form. So I'm going to minus 1 from both sides. Minus 1. These should cross out. and I'd be left with y equals x minus 4. My last step of general form would be to subtract y to the other side. I then have 0 equals x minus y minus 4. That's general form because it equals 0. Everything's on one side of the equation. And it follows my rules. My rules were the number in front of x has to be positive. It is. Rule 2, no decimals, no fractions. Look at that. No decimals, no fractions. This is an equation in general form with a slope between those 2 points, and it goes through one of them points. It goes through both of them, technically, but we use point P to go through. That's how this unit kind of all comes together. And it's challenging. We'll try question 2. This is even more challenging because you got to remember what the word perpendicular means. So the first step of these things is to read the question, try to figure out what it wants, and then come up with a strategy. It says, determine the equation in general form. So, determine the equation means create an equation in general form. I can like convert to general form, right? I always create one of the other 2 forms. Of a line through the point 5, 0, and perpendicular to the line with this equation. Awesome. Let's start with the point they gave. Is this point my y-intercept? Good. No, it's not, right? It's my x-intercept. It kind of looks like y-intercept, but it's not. It's a trick in you. This point is a completely random point. We're going to call it x1, y. So we need to go through that random point and be perpendicular to this line. What does perpendicular mean again?
Opposite.
Opposite, right? So makes a line like that, 90 degrees, 2 lines that cross. The slopes, we call them negative reciprocals. I just go neg, rec. Negative reciprocal. That means you flip the fraction, change the symbol. We want to be perpendicular to this line. Awesome. If we want to be perpendicular to this line, we got to figure out the slope of this line. How can we figure out the slope of a line that's in general form? It's been a while since we've done that. We're going to take this line, change it to be slope-intercept form, and then we can tell which numbers are slope, right? So take this and get y alone by itself. We're going to isolate y. To do that, I'm going to add 5y both sides. That gives me 3x plus 17 equals 5y. I'm almost in slope-intercept form, but there's a 5 on that y still, so I divide by 5. Then I rewrite my equation out, so I have 3 over 5x plus 17 over 5. Equals y. For this equation, this is my slope. We want to be perpendicular to this one. If we want to be perpendicular to that, that means our slope is the opposite symbol. So we're going to be negative because theirs was positive. And flip the fraction. That's the slope of our line that we're creating. Now that I have a slope and a random point, so I have x1 equals 5, y1 equals 0, I can create an equation. Which form am I going to want to use? If you have a slope and a random point, which form are you going to make? Slope point form, right? We don't have a y-intercept, so we go with slope point form. That's the same one we used just above you. So that's when you go y minus y1, y minus 0 equals m, which is 5 over 3, negative 5 over 3. Bracket x minus x1, which is 5. That's an equation that is perpendicular to this line and goes through the point 5, 0. Tricky, right? It's combining a lot of thoughts into one. They wanted their equation to be in general form. We're currently not in general form. To get into general form, the first thing we do is we multiply that m value in. When you multiply that m value in, I'm going to just rewrite this out. Y minus 0 is just y equals negative 5 divided by 3 times x becomes negative 5 divided by 3x. Like that. Then, negative 5 divided by 3 times negative 5. To put that in my calculator, I would put brackets around my negative 5 over 3. So I go bracket, negative 5 divided by 3, bracket. That's telling my calculator this is a fraction. And then times negative 5. That would give me positive 25 over 3. To get the decimal in your calculator, remember you hit math. The first option is fraction. It's the first option on your menu. Fantastic. That's almost general form, but we still have this y over here. So we're going to subtract y from both sides. That now gives me 0 equals negative 5 over 3x minus y plus 25 over 3. That is now general form. It equals 0. We then check our rules. Our rules are the number in front of x has to be positive. If we look, the number in front of x is definitely not positive. It's negative. So to fix that, we change all the symbols. So we're going to go back to this guy. We're going to make this now a plus, this now a plus, and this now a minus. So we change all the symbols. Step number 2, or rule number 2, no fractions are allowed. In this case, we do have fractions. We have a couple divided by 3s. To get rid of divided by 3s, you times everything by 3. So times by 3, times by 3, times by 3. I'm going to go all the way across. 0 times 3 is still 0. Equals 5 times 3 is 15. Divided by 3 is 5x. Remember, you just multiply the top and then you divide by the bottom number. plus, there's an invisible 1 in front of this y, so 3 times that would be 3y. And then minus 25 times 3 would be 75. Then divided by 3 would be 25. So minus 25. That is an equation in general form, which is perpendicular to the line we were given and goes through that random point 5, comma 0. I think that's as hard as it gets. I find that question very challenging. You have to know a lot of things. You have to know how to go from general and get a slope. So we converted it, right? Then you need to know how to get a slope and change it to be perpendicular. You then have to know how to create slope point form. You then have to know how to convert slope point form into general form. And then you have to know the rules of general form. That's 5 things you had to know to be able to calculate that question properly. That's a lot. Awesome. I think we have one left. All right. Same type of question. There's a slight trick to it, which we need to remember something from last unit to be able to do. We'll start off with find the equation in general form. Find the equation means create. Create the equation. In general form, we know we can't create in general form, but we'll change it to general form when we're done. Of the line perpendicular to this line. Perpendicular means negative reciprocal. Change the symbol, flip the fraction. Let's start with that. So you know you have to get a slope that's the negative reciprocal to this. I want you to try to change that into slope Y-intercept form, like we did on the last question, to figure out what your new slope will be for your line that you're creating. So try to manipulate that to be slope-intercept form. I'll give you a minute or so to manipulate it around, try to figure out slope. Alright, when given a line and trying to find the slope of that line, we change it into slope Y-intercept form. To get into slope Y-intercept form, you need y by itself. So I need to move this 7y. Currently, it's a negative 7y. The opposite of subtraction would be add 7y. So my first step would be to add 7y to both sides. That gives me 5x minus 10 equals 7y. I'm now one step away from being slope-intercept form. I need to somehow get rid of that 7. I get rid of that 7 by dividing by 7. When I divide by 7, I now have 5 over 7 x minus 10 over 7 equals y. For that line that they gave me, the number in front of the x is your slope. That's not the slope of my new line, that's the slope of the line they gave me. I want to be perpendicular to that slope. So my slope will be the negative reciprocal of that thing. Negative means change the sign. That one's positive, mine's negative. Instead of 5 over 7, I flip it to be 7 over 5. That's my slope. Awesome. Now, I need to have the same x-intercept. So find the equation in general form of a line perpendicular, we've done that part, with the same x-intercept. X-intercepts to us are random points, so our line is going to have a random point. When we talk about x-intercepts, what do we know about x-intercepts? They all have something in common. Some people are saying that. They all have y values of 0. So I actually know what my y1 is going to be. It's going to be 0. I also now know how to find my x-intercept. I find my x-intercept by changing my y value in this line to be 0. And that'll give me my x-intercept. So to solve that, I have x minus 2 times 0 minus 12 equals 0. 2 times 0 cancels. So I really have x minus 12 equals 0. To figure out what my x value is, I add 12 to both sides. That means x equals 12. That's my x1 point. I now have a slope and a point to go through. So I can create slope point form. Creating slope point form, we go y minus y1, y minus 0, equals m, which is negative 7 over 5, times x minus x1, x minus 12. This line is perpendicular to the first one, because I got a negative reciprocal slope, and it has the same x-intercept as the second line. And that x-intercept I represent as a random point, right? Just a point. Perfect. We need to convert that to general form. I'll give you a minute to try to convert that thing into general form. So remember, try to follow the same steps you followed on the last 2 pages. Okay, the first thing you have to deal with is that m value. So give it a shot.